Hello everybody, my name is Dr. Rob Francis and I'm one of the lecturers in creative and professional writing at the University of Wolverhampton. And this is the fourth and final little podcast that I'm doing for the Chain Coral Chorus, which is a project that I've been involved in the last 12 months, just over 12 months now, which was an investigation into the poetic and creative investigation into the Black Country geology, its geological heritage, and the way that that impacts and lays against our sense of self and our sense of community. And with a particular focus on the UNESCO Black Country Geopark and the many different sites that build that up. Big part of this project was commissioning 4 writers to go and investigate some of these sites and to share their work through a commissioned poem and a commissioned blog post. So in previous weeks, you've heard us speak with Emma Pursehouse, with Lee Armstrong, and with Liz Berry. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome a dear friend of mine, a good friend of the University of Wolverhampton's, the legend, Roy McFarlane.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you very much.
How are you?
I'm all right, my friend. All right. This little project has so many things that happened and created. It was a joy. It was interesting. It took me many places.
Lovely. That's really nice to hear. And that sort of has been echoed by Emma and Liz and Lee that took part in the project as well. And it's certainly been my experience too. You know, there's this sense that when you kind of go back to these places, and in your case in particular, it's a going back in time as much as it is going back to the place itself. You start to see things with fresh eyes that you hadn't noticed before. And you start to, and when you put that kind of geological or geographical lens, you really start to dig down into what the place is and what it's made of, but most importantly, what it means to you. So there's these like layers and layers and layers that you start kind of digging around in, isn't there?
Yeah. I think the very essence of being involved with Sedgley Beacon, and you just think of yourself as a little kid running around, or like my story was, Sedgley Beacon was a combination of hell as well as something to love kind of thing. So for me, I hated cross-country running, but we had to run up that hill. And it was just intriguing to come back to it and to know that there are so many stories in that hill. And I guess it's its own narrative that is across so many centuries, so many millenniums. And that's what I gathered that's what I learned when I went back to it and found so many stories about the place. And I think that's a part of the poem that really came out, or I think I wrote a blog about that. It seems a stagnant thing that sticks out the ground where everybody drives around, or if you're lucky enough, you walk up there. But wow, there's stories in that place. Oh, we could have kept on doing this for another couple of months, Rob, or for a year. So many stories in that place.
Yeah, I mean that's another thing that Lee Armstrong said. One of the other Black Country geo sites is the Bumble Hole and Warren's Hall in Netherton.
Right.
And he said that he jokingly apologized to me for taking so long over his poem and his blog, but because he had to keep going back to the place and kept finding new things to write about, it just kept taking the work into different avenues. And I think, you know, just to pick up on one of the points that you made there as well, there's a sense, especially when we're talking about landscapes like Sedgley Beacon and the other Black Country geo sites, there is a sense that it's a kind of time stood still, and it's this like solid thing that's always been there and will forever be there, and there's a sense of stillness about it. Right. But then throughout your work and through your observations, it then gets filled with movement and shape and sound and shifts and all of that as well. And I wonder whether there's something about that and the kind of with recognizing the geology there as well, that you kind of enter into a different mind space than you would have done if you hadn't have been, if you'd have just kind of been walking or driving around on your day to day.
And I think there's something about being artists, not necessarily just poets, but it's that wonderful gift and blessing that we have, that we can stop for a while, we can cut through the veil and see something more, and hopefully Sedgley Beacon talks, and I'll talk about, I'm sure this is the same with all the other artists and the locations that they went, but I guess Sedgley Beacon talked to me in the sense of revealing stuff. And I'm saying in the sense that for me, well, all that kind of geoscience and things like that, that's the last thing on my mind. As a kid growing up around it, that's what the beacon is made of, or what are the stories, or why is it called Sedgley Beacon? That's the last thing on my mind. I'm an urban kid, living in the area. It looks nice. There's this little green thing that sticks out the ground, and I haven't even got a clue of the plants and the stuff that are on there. It's just a nice, a nice, beautiful setting in the middle of all of these urban things that are going around. And you live a busy life as a young person, don't you? You're just running around, you're just enjoying life. You have nothing, Sedgley Beacon, meet you on Sedgley Beacon. You want to run down the hill, meet you up on Sedgley Beacon. You got a girlfriend, let's go up there on Sedgley Beacon, kind of thing. But now as an artist, wow, the veil is removed and you get to understand more, and Sedgley becomes a living being.
Yeah, absolutely. And we definitely get a sense of that in your poem and your blog as well, Roy, that it's not just a place, it's not just a dot on a map, it's the place that gives everything else its push forward. The other thing that I find quite curious about your poem and your views of Sedgley Beacon, view is probably the right word as well, isn't it? Yeah. That it's the place that holds lots of memories and holds lots of stories, and it's also a place where secrets and sort of youthful, secretive activity might take place.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at the same time, it's the place where you can see for as wide. I mean, outside of maybe Rowley Hills, the view's not going to get much better than Sedgley Beacon in terms of seeing how far you can see. So there's a sense that we're flooded with these stories and memories in the site where we're at our most perceptive.
Yes. So there's almost like you got me thinking about, what's that thing where I'm just thinking biblically now all of a sudden, where Moses will go to the top of the place to get the 10 Commandments, or get some inspiration, kind of thing, and maybe the beacon is I forgot the name of the mount, but it is the map for those moments of inspiration, for seeing further afield. I mean, the very story about being a beacon, which was a warning for invasions, and all these beacons would be lit all the way from the south coast all the way up north. Wow. And then that thing about this, I don't know if it's mythical or whatever, but if you climb to the top of the tower, you can see down to the English Channel. I just think it's amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that religious side, that spiritual side, is something else that the other writers and certainly myself have kind of picked up on with this with this project and kind of refining and walking our way through environments. Because of course Sedgley Beacon lends itself to the kind of Moses story really nicely, because it's such an arduous journey.
Yeah.
Especially from that side of the beacon, you've got a really steep and difficult climb.
Absolutely.
And obviously you get to the top, and it's through that pilgrimage, through that sacrifice, that you get the stories or the transcendence or the message or whatever. And within that, you've got that sense of being awestruck as well.
Yeah.
And there's something also very, very sublime and transcendent about recognizing our humanity's kind of insignificance, but also humanity's interconnectedness with our landscapes as well. Did you get a sense of that in your because I know you went several times, didn't you?
I did, yeah. Certainly that connection to the universe, as it were. Absolutely, without a doubt. I think the one time when I went up there, and it was kind of warm down on the streets when we left Parkfield, the old Parkfield school. By the time I got to the top, there was this cool breeze, and that's quite interesting. That sudden shift of temperature, kind of thing. But there's this amazing, it's divine kind of thing. It is you're this human being that is on the top of a hill, way up there in the skies, kind of thing, and you just see this mass of beautiful. You look as far as you can see across the horizon, and it's just beautiful. And there's an awe of the world around you because you're taken out. And imagine this was during a period of time of COVID and all our own personal issues. Me and you went up there at the period of time, and we saw a lot of people walking around there. So again, this was a place of escape, kind of thing, from the madness that was around us, from this pandemic that was going on. Here was a place that we escaped to, and it was free. We were free in that locality.
Yeah, that's really beautifully put, Roy. Really, really beautifully put. I've got a couple of other questions, and then we'll call it a day, Roy, if that's good.
No problems, man. Keep on talking, man.
One of my absolute favourite Roy McFarlane poems is from your first collection, beginning with Your Last Breath. Scar, which is obviously also set on Sedgley Beacon.
Yeah.
Where the landscape and the scars of the Industrial Revolution are kind of, and the sort of imperfect beauty of the landscape is then combined with the imperfect beauty of the lover and the love making, I suppose. Are there any connections between that older poem and this new one that you've written now, do you think, outside of just the landscape?
I guess it's quite interesting, though. Twice now I've talked about love making on Sedgley Beacon, isn't it? So that's kind of interesting, isn't it? A place of eroticism, yeah. What more can I say? I mean, I would like to say that the speaker is talking about two different stories, so it's not the same person. But it's a place of eroticism. What more can I say?
I mean, I think these sites do have that element to them. You know, I mean, it's ground that's been trod by Liz Berry quite well, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So much of her work is these kind of in between unusual landscapes, off kilter, weird landscapes, and how ripe they are for that kind of erotic energy. So there's a sort of sense of menace and a sense of
and I guess when as a young person, or in our mature age, again, Sedgley Beacon becomes this place. I don't want to call it like the Garden of Eden, but it's almost like that, isn't it? Where there is that kind of forbidden taking of something, and you're taking that risk, but you are caught in. Sedgley Beacon is just perfect for those places under the tree. Say it again.
It's like a fortress.
Yeah. It's quite intriguing. There is almost a Garden of Eden about that place as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. My other question as well, then, Roy, is maybe a personal one, but how did it feel to relive the how did it feel to relive the horrors of your cross-country runs? And have you got anything to say to your PE teachers for being such sadists and making you run up such a horrible climb?
I wish I could remember his name, honestly. Listen, it was quite interesting, you know, that when I did that Twitter, it was amazing that, you know, I got a couple of people who responded to me on Twitter saying they knew of that pain. We had Parkfield School that ran up there. I didn't know Colton Hills ran up there, and I had two people who sent to Twitter, yeah, we went up Sedgley Beacon kind of thing. So yeah, I'm sure it's a combination of joy and pain to a fair amount of people. But you know what was good going back up there? Not so much reliving the pain kind of thing, but it was just, I guess it was just refreshing that I didn't have to run, and I could take my time getting up the hill kind of thing. But there were so many mixed emotions that I went through, and on the one trip, and I hadn't realized, and I should know, I'm sure I knew this before, but it came so starkly to me that I could see the Beacon Cemetery from the top of the hill.
Yeah.
And that's where my parents are buried, and that was just profound. I can't go into details what that did to me. So that beacon has been, I can't say the beginning of life, because it was only when I was a teenager that I started going up there. But to be at the start of my youth, and to come back there and also see one cycle of a generation in the shadow of Sedgley Beacon. Wow, isn't that profound?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's really the nerve that your poem touches so well, and what works so beautifully in the fires of Sedgley Beacon is that there's this sense of, well, you called it reliving, which seems like a really, really poignant word. Because I was thinking about it as a sort of time travel, where you're sort of personally time traveling through the environment and reminiscing. And there's a sense that you're time traveling geologically with the references to the rocks and the layers of land, but also then politically and socially time traveling, well, with references to the closure of the steelworks and fathers coming over from the Windrush generation and whatnot. But reliving seems like an even more important term when you then put that kind of closure of the cemetery in the grand scheme of Sedgley Beacon itself as well. That feels like a really beautiful point to kind of finish on, unless you add any other comments to that, Roy.
Yeah, Robbie, you've nailed and encouraged some interesting subjects and themes tell you, I got goosebumps about the idea of me being Moses climbing up Sedgley Beacon.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it keeps coming back to that, doesn't it? It keeps coming back to that sense of preaching in your work too. Yeah. And I mean that in the traditional sense of
I know, and
father and whatnot.
and go on.
No, go on, please.
No, I just think there's probably elements of myself that no matter how much I run away, and run away is not the right word. That element, and I don't want to call it the preacher, but that aspect of theology in me will always be in my writing, and so opportunities like this, the theology will always come out. I can't run away from it.
Yeah, too right. Just like you can't run away from the beacon. Lovely. Right, Roy, it's been so lovely talking to you. If people that are listening to this, you should go and check out the Chain Coral Chorus and Roy's poem, The Fires of Sedgley Beacon, and his blog post that explains all of his process and his poetics and his observations is up on the Chain Coral Chorus blog. So please go and visit that. Roy, before we go, I want you to tell everybody where they can find you and where they can find your books.
Okay. There's my website, which is never updated, but you can still contact me through my website, roy.mcfarlane.com. It's www.roymcfarlane.com. And Nine Arches Press. You can always go to Nine Arches Press, get my books from there, and you can always contact me through Nine Arches Press as well. So that's great, Rob. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you again, Roy, and thanks for your time and brilliant poem.
Love you, man. You take care, yeah?